Now, I think we can all agree the masks were a nice idea. I just think they could have been done better. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 65 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about piloting your own life. My name is Nathan Pottle, and thank you for joining me today. I almost forgot to introduce myself right there. I had a bit of a pause. That's kind of weird, because I open the show the same way every single week. But maybe I'm just thrown a little bit off here, and I should mention this right off the bat, that right now we are in the swing of allergy season, and normally I take an allergy pill every morning when I wake up, but today I forgot to take it, and I did not realize that I forgot to take an allergy pill until my throat was already really scratchy and having like my nose getting all stuffed up. And then it was at that point that I realized what a fool I had been. So I ran to our medicine cabinet, grabbed myself an allergy pill, popped it back, and now here I am. I'm feeling a little bit better. Let's hope that it kicks in. But if, for whatever reason, my throat is sounding really scratchy or my voice is all kind of off today, that's going to be why. That's not the big news today. Before we get into today's topic, there's one piece of news that I'm very, very excited about, and this isn't a news show. However, in my city on Friday, so the day that this episode is released, movie theaters will be opening back up. Cineplex is opening its doors, and I'm gonna get to go watch a movie for the first time in 4 months. 4 months. It's been such a long spell. I was sitting down and I was thinking about it, and I do not think that I have gone 4 months without seeing a movie in theaters in probably 10 years. Which is crazy to think about, but also is just a testament to how much I love movies and films, and the theater-going experience is absolutely part of that love for me. So on Friday, they don't have any new releases, so my wife and I are just gonna pick a movie, one that we've already seen, and we're just gonna go watch it. We don't know what we're seeing just yet. We're either gonna go see 1917, or we're gonna go see Emma, both of which we've already seen in theaters, and Emma, we actually bought the digital version so we can watch it at home whenever we want. But there's something about that theater experience that we might want to watch it on the big screen again. So maybe next week I'll catch you up on how going back to the theater since COVID kind of works and how that experience was for me. This is kind of a monumental moment in cinema history, and I know in the States we've had theaters opening up again already for a while now, but just here in my city, we're getting them open on Friday. What day is Friday? That's the 26th. Friday, July 26th is when I am going to go back to a movie theater and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to enjoy a movie on the big screen the way they're meant to be watched. And I'm so excited about that. I can't wait. Just 4 months is way too long. It's way too long. And that's not to say I haven't watched movies because I'm reviewing a movie today. But I just, there's something about that theater experience that I love so much. But I did just mention today I am reviewing a movie. That's the title of the episode. I'm talking about A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Now, this movie is on Amazon Prime, and as soon as my wife and I saw that it was on Prime, we hopped on the chance to watch it. Unfortunately, we missed the opportunity to watch it in theaters, so we watched it at home on Amazon Prime, and now I'm going to sit here and talk about it because this movie is one that I was really looking forward to. If you're not aware, it's about the relationship between a reporter and Fred Rogers, who is Mr. Rogers from the TV show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, if that's not enough information to quite get you there to who this guy is. And it's really interesting the way that Mr. Rogers interacts with people and just the way he sees the world and gives absolutely every single person on the planet the benefit of the doubt and treats them with such kindness and generosity, and at the same time, he's really genuine about it. So let's talk about this movie really quick. Let's do a quick story summary. I'm not really going to do a non-spoiler spoiler section. I'm just going to kind of talk about the film. This is not a movie that is really going to blow you away with twists and turns in the plot. So having a spoiler section is really not necessary. I'm just going to talk about the things I liked and didn't like. If that's a problem for you, I'm really sorry. It's not going to be anything huge. I'm not going to talk about any of the kind of like big plot stuff. It's fine though. It's not a problem. Don't worry about it. Anyways though, this is the story about a reporter, and he is assigned to write an article about Mr. Rogers. Now, it's supposed to be this small article, but after he meets Mr. Rogers, he discovers that he's a much more complex person than anyone really realizes, and he needs to really dive into who Mr. Rogers is as a person. And at the same time, this reporter is going through a lot of his own problems and things throughout the movie, and Mr. Rogers reaches out to him as a friend and really helps him see the best version of himself that he can be and allows him to achieve that for himself. Now, the name of this reporter in the movie, his name is Lloyd. In real life, though, this is based off of a true story, very loosely, I will add. I'll get into that a little bit later. But Lloyd Vogel is a fictional character based off of a real person. Stuff is added in there for drama and to kind of raise the stakes and really help us to understand who Lloyd is as a character. So not everything that happens in this movie is 100% accurate. I know that there are a lot of movie fans out there who really dwell on accuracy of a story, and if a movie veers too far off of the path of the story that it's telling, then they are disappointed in the film. I don't feel that way. I understand that in order to make a film, you have to make changes in order to keep the audience engaged and entertained. That's kind of what the whole industry is about. So there are aspects of his life, and really the more dramatic aspects of his life, that just straight up did not happen. They don't exist. And once again, that's not a problem for me. The big thing I gotta talk about here in this movie is Tom Hanks. Now, Tom Hanks plays Fred Rogers. Now, he doesn't really look like Fred Rogers, right? But he feels like Mr. Rogers. And that's the great thing about Tom Hanks, and I may have mentioned this on the podcast before or not. But Tom Hanks is one of those guys who he's super, super famous, extremely recognizable, but at the same time, he's a diverse enough actor that when I see Tom Hanks in a movie, I don't go like, oh, I'm watching Tom Hanks right now. No, I was watching Mr. Rogers. And it goes back to another film of his, Saving Mr. Banks, where he plays Walt Disney. Tom Hanks does not look like Walt Disney, but he felt like Walt Disney. And that's what's more important. If an actor is able to exude that persona, then how they look as opposed to the real character is not important. And that's what Tom Hanks is really able to nail in this film. Just the compassion of Mr. Rogers and just caring for everyone that he interacts with. There's a scene early in the movie where Lloyd first comes onto set to meet Mr. Rogers, and it's revealed that Fred has held up the shoot of this newest episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood for 45 minutes or something like that, because he's spending the time to talk to this sick child who came onto the set to visit him, and he gives this child all of his attention and all of his care and just latches onto him and makes sure that this child feels important and loved and special. And there's something just so hopeful and uplifting about this entire thing, and everything that Mr. Rogers stands for as a person is really spectacular. And then when Mr. Rogers finally meets Lloyd and sees him from across the movie set, he stops filming, he completely brings everything to a halt so he can go over and introduce himself and already begin to structure this friendship. When I was doing a little bit of the research into this movie, because I knew it wasn't 100% accurate, when I was looking up things, I found some fun facts, and one of the fun facts I read, I thought it was really funny, is that when Mr. Rogers was still alive and he was interviewing interviewers, the article, the journalists, and all of those people often had a very difficult time during the interview process with Mr. Rogers, because he cared more about the interviewer than the interviewer would care about them. So he would sit down and he would look right into their soul, into the heart of who they are, and ask them questions about their lives and really try to get to know every single person that he met and tried to remember everyone that he met and tried to make a difference in every single way that he can. Like, he was always giving to others. Now, all of that sounds really amazing, but that is where I get to one of the negatives that I have about this movie. And the negative is that the movie's focus is really on the character of Lloyd as opposed to Fred Rogers. Now, I think this is supposed to be because Lloyd is a more relatable character to the audience, and Mr. Rogers is obviously one of the kindest, most generous people to have ever walked this planet. So it would be hard for us as an audience to connect with him, but at the same time, we as the audience are fascinated by him, and he's not on screen enough, which is crazy to say. And when the Academy Award nominations came out for this film, and it said that Tom Hanks was nominated in a supporting actor role for his role as Mr. Rogers, I was kind of taken aback. I was like, oh, like maybe this is some kind of political move where they put him in a supporting role so that someone in the lead actor category can be nominated and win. But after seeing the movie, I understand that choice because he's actually not in the movie as much as you would think, given the fact that he is Tom Hanks and he's the only person on the movie poster. So I apologize to the Academy for just thinking that all of your decisions are politically minded. Most of them are, don't get me wrong. But in this particular instance, I was incorrect in my assumptions about Tom Hanks' nomination. So I will take the blame for that one. So sorry about that. There's one other thing about this movie that I really like, and if you're familiar with the television show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, is that there's a lot of minis and like little miniatures of buildings and cityscapes, and there's a trolley car that goes along the track and into the tunnel, and when it comes out, it's in the land of imagination, I think is what it's called. But in any case, in the movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, every single wide shot is done that way. It's all done with minis, so whenever there's like cars driving or airplanes taking off, it's all done as if like a child had set up like toy buildings and stuff and was playing around with them, which I found was a really clever and creative way to connect us more with Mr. Rogers and to also pay homage to the way his show looked and the way his show felt. And speaking of feelings, also this movie is incredibly hopeful and uplifting. Like it has those feelings of happiness and joy, and just so much hope is poured into this movie. And I think it's because the character of Lloyd Vogel is kind of a cynical person, and when he interviews people, he really like digs into them and writes about like the worst versions of these people, and he's not a very nice writer, and he sees the world from a very cynical point of view. So when he meets Mr. Rogers, who looks at him as a person who can be better than who he is, and he sees him as better than what Lloyd sees himself as, it really opens our eyes as audience members in order to see that, hey, maybe we're not all that bad, maybe we can be better, maybe we can aspire to more in our lives than what we are currently doing, and I think that that's beautiful. It's a wonderful message, it's fantastic, and that is definitely why Lloyd Vogel is more of the lead character than Tom Hanks, because I can very easily see a movie about Mr. Rogers and watching him saying like, oh my goodness, this man is so great and so wonderful, I'll never be that good, and then coming away from the film with the wrong view on things, right? So having the focus on Lloyd Vogel is meant to make us sympathize with him, and then us and Lloyd Vogel together look at Mr. Rogers as an example that we can aspire to. So even though I would have preferred more Tom Hanks in the movie, all of this makes sense, and so I'm completely on board with it, and I like the structuring with the movie the more and more that I think about it. Overall, this movie is very heartwarming, it's very well put together, it's well acted, it's well directed. The cinematography sometimes makes some weird choices, and that kind of took me out of the movie for a few shots in the film, like very specific shots that I felt could have been framed slightly differently or taken from a different angle that would have just improved the shot all that much more. But that's really only my minor concerns with the movie. And then, of course, I would have loved to have more Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers. So overall, this movie is very good. I liked it a lot. However, if I were to recommend a movie about Mr. Rogers, it's actually not going to be A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. As much as I enjoyed it, it's going to be actually the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor. Now, I don't know if you have seen Won't You Be My Neighbor, but it is so good. Even if you don't like documentaries, check this one out. I think the reason that I prefer the documentary to the movie is that there really is that focus on Fred Rogers that I want, and it dives into him, the things that he did in his life, and everything that he worked towards in order to make children understand what they're feeling and how to work with those feelings and be in control, basically. And Mr. Rogers is a person who's in incredible control of his emotions and how he feels about things. And there's one scene in particular in the documentary I want to talk about quickly when Mr. Rogers is going to this court hearing in order to get funding for PBS in order to keep producing his show and other children's shows like it. And he sits down in front of this judge, and this judge is notorious for not overturning rulings and just being kind of a jerk about things. And Mr. Rogers sits down and he looks at the judge and he just talks to him about what it's like to be a kid and what it's like as adults for us to connect with children. And he doesn't speak for very long, 3 or 4 minutes at the most. And the judge just like looks at Mr. Rogers and I says like, well, you've just convinced me and you have your funding. Like, he just talked his way into getting funding just by being a genuinely good person. And that's the kind of stuff that I really want to know, and the kind of events in his life that I'm fascinated about. So that's why I would recommend the documentary over the movie. Both are very good though. So actually check out both. Check them both out. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is on Amazon Prime. I don't know where A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is. I got it from my local library. The libraries are still not open here in my city. I don't know if libraries are open where you are from. Or maybe it's on a streaming service somewhere. I'm not really sure. I think that's going to be pretty much it for today, though. Kind of a shorter one, just because I am having to take a lot of pauses because my throat is really not feeling well at all, and that pill just hasn't quite kicked in yet. So I am going to start closing off the show. What I want to know from you guys is, have you seen A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, or have you seen Won't You Be My Neighbor, the documentary? Have you seen either of them? Do you enjoy those movies or not? Why don't you let me know? You can reach out to me. You can find me on social media, on Twitter at Pottle Nathan, and you can find the show on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to subscribe to the show. You can do so on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other places. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It really means a lot to me, especially on a movie that maybe wasn't as big. If you're still wanting to sit down and listen to the review and see if you want to check this movie out. That's what I'm all about here, is just recommending other movies to people all the time. If you haven't seen it, or even if you haven't heard of a movie before, maybe you'll discover something new. So that's what I'm looking out for here. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.